Hello there, Adam Eason here. So within any area of scientific study, there's typically someone or some group who argues against those findings or argues against the scientific approach altogether. And my experience has been, and I have found this to be particularly true of the field of hypnotherapy and those who oppose hypnosis science conducted by academia. And this is referred to as science denial. And in recent times, we've had people denying the science behind all manner of public health related issues. We have people who deny climate science. And in the fields of hypnotherapy, the field of hypnotherapy and hypnosis, we have people who refute claims made by researchers, especially if they do not fit with their own position. Now, I'm not going to repeat the kinds of sentiments that I've spoken of in other videos to do with the promotion of critical thinking in this field, or how to think scientifically, or why this field needs to know about Shoshin, or seeing both sides of a debate or a discussion within one's hypnotherapy education. You can go and find those videos on my YouTube channel, on my college website. But because I'm focused on, specifically on science denial today. So science denial, it's endemic within the hypnotherapy field. Researchers and science supporters, of which I include myself, have to really tough it out to defend against such denial. And this video is really attempting to show how you can also do that effectively. In particular, if you're a hypnotherapist seeking to advance this field and promote, science within this field and scientific legitimacy within this field. So science denial, it's the denial of a scientific finding. In the field of hypnotherapy, it's usually argued in such a way as to persuade fence-sitting hypnotherapists or newly qualified hypnotherapists, or even those that are ignorant of the science that we have, or aimed at creating more popularity of oneself in the face of those who would dare to speak out against pseudoscience that's peddled so greatly in the hypnotherapy field. And let's be honest, okay, this field is full. I mean, full to the brim of people selling techniques and approaches and trainings that have no science to support their offerings at all. We'd consider people, those people would consider people such as myself a threat when we demand some scientific support for those techniques and for those approaches. The benefits of science denialism are apparent in those cases. It makes sense for them to deny science and a scientific approach and be affronted by people such as myself. So in this video, I'm going to use a process that's known by the acronym FLICC. FLICC, FLICC. It's coined by John Cook back in 2014, which was building upon the 2009 publication by authors called Dethelm and McKee, and it's also been tested in other papers. Anyway, FLICC stands for F, fake experts; L, logical fallacies; I, impossible expectations; C, cherry picking; and then the other C, conspiracy theories. And we can see the FLICC techniques used all the time. We can see the FLICC's techniques can be applied all of the time within the hypnotherapy field, especially in online groups and so on. And it's a nice and a neat structure to use to spot and potentially refute some of the science denialism that goes on out there. So F for fake experts. The first thing out of the mouth of science deniers is sometimes, very often, that there's some legitimate scientist who supports their claim, when actually it's an outlier, a rare voice that's going up against scientific consensus. A familiar example is when hypnotherapists cite the 1964 study by von Dedenroth in support of boasting a 95% success rate for stopping smoking using hypnotherapy. The von Dedenroth study had no control group. It's a majorly flawed study in a number of different ways, yet many still use it. They have it on their website or use it to support claims of incredibly high success rates with smokers. And, you know, the actual evidence to support stopping smoking with hypnosis is nowhere near that. Nowhere near as impressive as that. You know, it's still impressive, but it's nowhere near that. It's the same with a great many other approaches whereby an outlier study gets quoted that's far removed from the general consensus of other studies to support an approach. People tend to seek out research to fit their view or their stance, rather than actually looking at the full depth and breadth of the research to allow it to inform their position effectively. Often the denialists' fake experts tend to go hand in hand with attacks against actual experts who are often claimed to be biased in some way. Often this is used when I've questioned techniques such as regression to cause. You know, regression to cause supporters and those who make their living training people to do regression to cause and little else often refer to prominent therapists who scientifically speaking are fake experts, you know, if they're not supported by science. But in particular, I've had people refer to prominent trainers or authors, you know, who are not supported by anything other than anecdote. Or you know, so some heavy proclaimed experience. You know, I've worked with lots and lots of people type of claims. Now, I'm not poo-pooing anecdote, and I'm not poo-pooing that level of experience, especially if it's real. You know, it's valid, but that alone is not scientific support. And the mechanisms that may have made those experiences of that busy trainer or busy therapist or made those informed those anecdotes, you know, those mechanisms may be different. You know, the things that made them effective may be different to those being suggested by that trainer if they've not carried out, you know, scientific inquiry into what they've done. You know, I mean, with respect to them, that you know, they're not researchers themselves, usually carrying out independent research to rebut a scientific critique aimed at some of the ways regression is employed within hypnotherapy. So FL, logical fallacies. These are a favorite tool of the pseudoscientists, but they're also employed by nearly, you know, everyone through all walks of life. Logical fallacies, they include ad hominem attacks, straw man arguments, red herrings, false dichotomies. You know, in fact, hundreds of such logically invalid ways to make a point. Logical fallacies appeal to your brain's, you know, natural tendency, native tendency to think anecdotally rather than logically. So thus, many arguments that are logically fallacious can still be compelling, and really they are, you know. The science denier needs to depend upon it being compelling, because, you know, he or she has no persuasive science on his or her side, you know, unlike the true scientist who follows the evidence and thus has no need to make logically invalid arguments. A common red herring that's thrown out by hypnotherapist science deniers is that academics, you know, can't even agree on a definition of hypnosis. So how can we trust anything they say? Or academics are offering up a definition of hypnosis that varies to mine. So how can we trust anything that they say with regards to clinical approaches? This is a red herring. It's an irrelevant distraction. You know, definition and clinical applications don't really have anything to do with one another. You know, there are some arguments to be formed and forged, and some discussion to be had, but you know, they're not really anything to do with one another. I've had fellow hypnotherapy trainers say that the science that I am supporting, you know, me personally, is not relevant because I have a vested interest in science, because my college trains people in evidence-based approaches to hypnotherapy. And this is an ad hominem fallacy that's aimed at me personally, rather than the science itself or the actual point that's being made. So FLI is impossible expectations. Another science denier's strategy is to hold the existing science to an impossible standard, with the implication that if it can't meet that standard, it's therefore wholly invalid and it should be discarded, you know, entirely discarded in favor of the denier's preferred facts or preferred position. An evidence-based protocol is not 100% efficacious, so therefore the one created by the hypnotherapist that's never been scrutinized scientifically is better somehow. I mean, it seems like crazy logic, but it gets said. Or a scientific study had some critique and therefore it's rendered invalid. Or the classic one, you know, so many scientific studies from the past have been superseded, so this current one is likely to also be superseded in the future. So therefore, why should I listen to anything science says? I'm not joking. This strength of the scientific method, whereby it yields to updated findings, is also used as a way of dismissing science by some hypnotherapists. You know, so many hypnotherapists say to me, I mean, so many, and fellow trainers say to me, or they say on forums away from me, well, the lab is different to the clinic, or the experiment setting is so different to the clinical setting or my therapy room. So all science in this field is defunct. Firstly, lots of research findings are taken from clinical trials conducted in clinical settings, even if they are standardized sometimes. Or in a similar vein, you know, researchers are not trained therapists, so that shows that science should be denied. Firstly, sometimes they are trained therapists and psychologists and psychiatrists and nurses and really well-trained people. But secondly, with research, it is okay to accept that absolute replication of the clinical or therapeutic environment may be unattainable. And this then gets taken into account. And we start to think to ourselves, well, you know what, we can take these results and this approach, when it's used in a therapeutic environment, we may be able to raise that efficacy because of what we do in the therapeutic environment. No science finding is 100% proven, at least psychologically, you know, in psychology fields. And that's in fact the strength of the scientific method. You know, every finding remains open to new information and improvement. And thus it's always getting better and stronger. The science process, by definition, is never complete. Therefore, there's no impossible standard that it can meet. So, you know, one must be careful to keep expectations reasonable and rational and not impossible. FLIC, our first C is cherry picking. And this is the process of selecting only that data which supports your preferred finding and ignoring any data that doesn't. So, for example, a proponent of ancient remedies might well discuss only the conclusions of old processes from history or supporting statements of success, and completely dismiss the far larger amount of work supporting the updated science-supported approaches. And there's a lot of people out there, promoting mesmer's approaches still, nothing wrong with that necessarily, as long as you point out the flaws and the mechanisms that make it effective when it is effective, and not just replicate some of the nonsense in the name of ancient wisdom, somehow bestowing extra power upon this approach. I had a well-known trainer, really well-known trainer on one of my podcasts, who said during that recording that he rated Freud, as Freud was pretty much the only person who had conducted solid science into psychotherapy. That's hilarious. I had to bite my tongue out, to be respectful. We have some wonderful science to support our field. If only this field were more aware of it and used it, instead of rehashing the noise that's taught by so much of frontline hypnotherapy training. I have to add here as well, Freud never followed the scientific method, and most of what he offered is considered pseudo-scientific by the majority today. But to an innocent audience, it may appear that there's no data except the cherry-picked items or the ancient approaches, for example, especially if that's all you get taught by your trainer. Cherry-picked findings always exclude contradictory information, while good science strives to find and include as much contradicting information as it can. These are efforts, or rather the scientific method, a key part of it is to put effort into disproving a hypothesis. Falsifiability, it's at the heart of the scientific method. So our final C is conspiracy theories. And generally speaking, the moment you hear a conspiracy theory proposed, you can be assured that you're listening to a science denier. Big pharma are trying to bring down hypnotherapy because there's no profit for them in hypnotherapy. Or large health organizations such as the NHS ignore hypnotherapy for a wide number of conspiratorial reasons. They're conspiring, so the claim goes, to suppress the field of hypnotherapy, as it would threaten their profits or their funding or whatever, their existence. What's more threatening to the field of hypnotherapy is the amount of nonsense spoken by hypnotherapists, the amount of nonsense that's written by the frontline hypnotherapy field. If more hypnotherapists adhered to science and represented the field more ethically, more professionally, more considerately, would be far less repressed. You can be sure of that. Obviously, though, conventional medical doctors and big pharma, they're all in cahoots and are all repressing the field of hypnotherapy to keep everyone sick so that they can make the most profit. Well, that's Flick applied to the field of hypnotherapy, FLICC. There's probably some echoing of my sentiments from other videos, but it felt like a good time and a good way to revivify some of those themes. But now that we know what to look for, we can react more readily when we perceive that we're being flicked off by a science-denying hypnotherapist. Hopefully you saw what I did there. That's it. Do subscribe to this channel. I'm going to be putting a lot more out in coming weeks and months. And once again, there's going to be some action on my YouTube channel. Visit my college website for details of our courses and memberships and trainings in the field of self-hypnosis and hypnotherapy. Many thanks for tuning in. I send you my very best wishes. Goodbye for now.